Hey, Renee.
Hi. Hey, Nick.
Today we're going to talk about personal self-care for the leader who's working with the disciples who have been sexually abused or gone through severe trauma. And it's important for leaders to take care of themselves. And so I just wanted to bring up a few different self-care things. So you ready to have that in a discussion?
Absolutely.
We had talked about this before on another video, but know what fills your bucket. So I know for me, going fishing fills my bucket. It really just helps me to be recentered, gives me that quiet time outside alone. Even if I go fishing with my husband, there's a moment or time in there where it's just self-reflection as you're staring across the water and waiting for the fish to bite, that type of thing. So knowing what fills your bucket, recognizing it, and making sure that you know when your bucket is getting empty. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then to schedule a time to actually fill it. You can look at your calendar and see some items that are coming up and go, you know what, that's going to possibly drain me some. So what am I going to set on the calendar to be able to refill my bucket? Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Absolutely. That's imperative for leaders, but even I have to do it an extra amount of time because of my health. I'll get depleted even more from energy.
Mm.
Uh, so, an example of that is like last week, it was having to take care of something in conversation with another person to take care of that. And it took more than one phone call
Mm.
to deal with the situation. It was somebody that was in the hospital, and we had to make sure she had proper care. And we couldn't knock it out in just one quick 10-minute conversation. It became draining. And I knew I had follow up that I needed to do with other people and other projects the rest of the week, but I ended up having to call and say, hey, this week I can't meet you because I need to take care of myself because that what happened at the beginning of the week,
Ah,
it depleted me. So I had to practice self-care. I was going to be no good for anybody else. So
wise, very
yeah.
wise.
So even if I was healthy, what you have spoken into my life has been understand how to schedule it in so that you don't have that depletion. And this was something that came out of left field, so it's not something I could have planned around.
So
And
you
had my,
adapted. Yes, very
I have
good.
to, yeah,
No, it's tough. It's tough when you already have a schedule coming up and this emergency happened in there and you really need to take care of it and deal with it. And you may feel like you're letting other people down. But if you're being wise, that's when it all comes together. And I really think that God honors that so much with us being wise. And you know what? We can't be God to everybody.
we're not.
We're not supposed to be God to anybody. And so, very good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think our job is to develop leaders, like you said, not be God to other leaders, but to be God's helper in their life. And we're just there to help develop them and still have to put parameters around ourselves so we can be a good helper. And if we don't do this self-care, we're depleting ourselves amongst depleting time with family members. There's so much that can come from it if we're not so aware and doing it intentionally.
And we're being a bad example to those that we're leading.
And I can't say I've always been a good example. I'm in a better place now when it comes to self-care. Much
Good.
different. Yeah. I like what you said about when you go fishing, it gives you an opportunity of quiet time. Um, but then you said reflection, a time of reflection. And I think reflection is a habit we've got to build in. It's not something I learned growing up, um, but I think it's something that we as leaders have to build in. And what I mean by that is when you go fishing, you reflect. What do you reflect on? Are you reflecting on situations that you need to improve, or what do you find yourself mostly reflecting on? I'll just ask you that.
Probably more than anything of, okay, God, what's going on and what do we need to talk about? And a lot of times it's what I have done, who I am working with. And it's just a continual conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And if we don't take that time, I think that reflection, the lack of reflection could hinder us in ministry, I think.
Absolutely. I can't do
Yeah.
anything without the Holy Spirit's guidance. And I'm so much more effective.
Well, and the thought that came to mind when you said reflection was, how many times have I done a project? How many times have I done an event? And immediately afterwards, I'm already criticizing. I'm like, okay, we got to fix this for next time. And I'm already making my list, and I'm criticizing, I'm being critical instead of celebrating it, and instead of reflecting on it in a positive note versus negative note. So I think that reflection can be so effective. Like, as I'm learning from you, is when I'm coaching somebody, and then when you're done with that coaching, you then got to go back through your notes. And there could be a time of reflection while you're going through those notes of, okay, what did I miss? And you're talking to the Holy Spirit. Or what could I have done better, but not a crap talk, not a negative self-talk that's going on during that time, but okay, what did I miss? How could I improve next time? So the reflection can be a teaching moment as well. And learning, what do I still need to learn in order to be better the next round?
A lot of times the reflection time is just being in his presence. There'll be a lot of talk at first, just the same as when I get with my husband, John, we both jump into the car and we start chatting. But after a while, there's no conversation and we're so enjoying each other's company, sitting, driving somewhere.
Yeah.
There is no conversation that is outwardly going, and we're still enjoying each other's company so much. We're so glad each other is there.
That's important.
And so it's the same there. I'm sitting there fishing, and nature just reminds me of God so fast, so quickly,
Amen.
and so beautifully. I think that's why it refills me so quickly.
Amen.
Another thing to avoid is to avoid compassion fatigue. And that might have been something you were trying to avoid for this coming week with having too many appointments going after when you have such a emergency.
Right.
That can cause a lot of compassion fatigue happening. So avoid that compassion fatigue. If you know you've got some heavy clients that are going to draw on a lot of compassion, it's not great for me to put them back to back. I will just end up so empty.
Unpack that compassion fatigue just a little bit more. I know there's even a book out there about it. And I even remember hearing that and going, what? When I first heard it. So for others,
let me go with you just for an example. Anybody who's watched any video of when I've been telling you a story of a hard situation, they could see on your face, Renee, empathy. They could see empathy on your face, and that it hurts you inside to hear of something so horrific to happen. It makes you sad. It makes you feel for them. Well, that's giving compassion. Okay. And that's great. I'm glad that you have that. But I could see where different people can react differently in all different kinds of situations where their compassion can just keep going and going and going. And they're just exhausted physically, mentally, and emotionally at the end of the day because they just had so much compassion and empathy all day long. And I see that more in you. God has given you incredible empathy. I have empathy, but I know it's not as large as yours is. It's a gift that you have. And I admire it. But at the same time, I know that I can get brain fatigue on listening. So mine isn't so much compassion fatigue. Mine is listening fatigue.
Yeah.
So but the majority of people I work with, I really encourage these leaders to avoid compassion fatigue. If you got really needy clients at the time, that you're working with disciples, make sure you space them out during the week, not
Yes.
back to back continually.
Yes, yes. To add to that, what I have learned being that compassionate carrier, and teaching that to others after I learned it was, I am not the one to be bearing it on my shoulders. Once it's told to me, and that time is over with that person, I have to release it to Christ. Because if I don't, boy, that load, that's a heavy load to carry of someone's. And
It is.
It's yes to be beside them and have that with them, but when you're done with that time with them, there's actually, even in the process, giving it up to the Lord. Lord, what do you want me to do with this? I know I'm not supposed to carry it myself. It's not a burden that I'm supposed to carry. I have to give it to him. And then he refuels for the next time around. But I've got to give it. And I'm teaching that to other leaders as well. I have found I've had to say that,
Excellent.
It's important to give it to Christ.
Another item I tell leaders to avoid is compromising your time or your family's time. Now that has to do with boundaries, and that's a whole different subject, which can go very large. And I don't really want to go there too much, but you know what I'm talking about when it comes to compromising your time. Let's say, Renee, you had the next hour to yourself. You had it planned out. It was your next hour to have. Eddie said he was going to be gone and he's going to be back dinner, but he's not going to bring it back for an hour. You have 1 hour. And guess what? Somebody goes ahead and calls, and you already see the phone number, you see caller ID, and you already know, you have an idea of what's going on type thing. You need to prayerfully pray, ask God, should I answer that phone? It's super important, especially when you get emails and somebody is hot and they're really going off their emotions, and you know what? Sometimes that is not worth your time as well, right then and there. I find if I get an email like that, it's best for me to pray and let it sit for a bit.
Yeah.
The other is family time. If it is already past 5 p.m. in the evening, I pray when I see my phone ringing, if I should even touch that. And most of the time, I'm telling you, it's a no. It's a no. So those that I work with, I make sure they know my boundaries of when I will talk on the phone and how they could text me and what an emergency actually is, all of those things.
I've appreciated you sharing your boundaries, because your boundaries taught me how to start putting mine into practice, because I was letting people knock on my door any time of day. I was picking up the phone to the point of, this is years ago, where my family actually labeled me the telemama, because anybody that called, I'd answer. And because I thought they needed somebody to talk to.
And they did, in their mind.
I've learned.
Well, and that brings us into the next section of pay attention to your signs that your family feels encroached upon.
Yeah, yeah.
If you see them rolling their eyes when your phone starts buzzing because of a text, or it's ringing again, and they're like, boy, you just keep getting texts all day long, and it's a negative type connotation, or type, because you could put your phone on vibrate. You could put your phone in another room. There are things you can do, but if you hear negative tone of voice, your family's feeling encroached upon, and when they're with you, they want to be with you.
True. Yeah.
And I don't want somebody being bitter over the fact that I'm trying to serve others for the kingdom. But you need to also respect the time that if I'm with you, Renee, I'm with you, Renee. And if I constantly kept answering text messages on my phone while I'm in the middle of talking with you, it doesn't make you feel like you matter much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how your family's going to feel as well.
Like their second. It's when some of us as leaders, that's hard. It's hard to separate the two and practice the boundaries, and not, who is it? What do they need? What's the emergency? You know, even a recent one was, it was a spiritual warfare one, and that's a heartstring for me. And it's funny that you and I got on the phone right afterwards, and you called me out. Renee, is that a battle you're supposed to be part of or not? I'm like, oh, stink, I didn't ask the Lord. I didn't need to be present. But at the time, someone was asking me to be present, to lead, to, you know, boom, boom, boom. And I'm already.
In a section and an area you're good at.
Yeah, I could do blindfolded in my head, and then I can get in, get out, but that's not ever how it always how it plays out. And your challenge made me go to the Lord, and God, it was pretty quick that He didn't give me the yes to go. I had to stay back and trust that God was going to take care of it, and He did.
Yay.
Amen.
The other is to know what fills your family's buckets. Now, everybody's going to be a little different, but figure out what fills their buckets so that you're able to go ahead when you see them low, start putting stuff in their buckets to be filled up as well. You don't want to go empty, and you don't want them to go on empty. It's really hard to fill up an empty bucket, but one that's half full, 3/4 full, it's easy to top off.
Yes. And ask God to give you revelation of not only what fills the bucket, but even people's personalities. Like, have somebody in my life that just was very quiet. It was a couple of people in my life that were very quiet at the time, but I didn't know how to serve them. I didn't know how to fill their bucket. I didn't know what made them happy, you know? And I had to keep asking God, help me with this relationship, because they're quiet. They're not telling me much. So how do I ask? What kind of questions do I ask? How do I find these things out? And God showed me. But you got to learn personalities, and you got to learn, I don't know the right word to say it, but sometimes there's some that are harder to figure out than others. And learning what their love language is. Some people you could be doing the wrong thing. You're thinking you're filling the bucket, but you're
stepping all over their toes.
Yeah. Or you're sending cards all the time. They don't care about a card.
That's, you know,
they just need presence with you. You know, there's simple things that we can do to fill our family's bucket, but maybe we're just not aware until we learn certain things about their love languages or their personality or, you know, their interests. It might take a little work.
When it comes to family, that's another item, is to talk to your family about their feelings of how they feel about others joining your family in an activity, whether it's a family meal, a holiday, vacations. It's so easy as a leader, as you're working with disciples, to feel like just telling them, you know what, why don't you just stay for dinner? Or why don't you go ahead? Our family's going to go to the zoo. You want to come to the zoo? You want to bring your family and go to the zoo? I believe it's honorable to go ahead and talk to your family ahead of time and ask them, what do they think about you inviting these other people along to join in a family type situation that you already had planned.
And that includes if your kids are already grown and moved out and they're coming home for something, you still want to check in with them, because this might be they're looking forward to just a one-on-one with dad, or just looking forward to a one-on-one with mom. Maybe they need to have a conversation time. And if you have that person you're ministering to there, they know that that person's going to get the attention, whereas in themselves may have to come second.
Right. And they may have wanted to visit and talk more intimately, and they can't do that with that person.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And lastly was to work through your own areas of weaknesses or issues. Yeah. We all have them. And that's something we should all continually be working through, processing through with God. Iron on iron with friends. Make sure you make the appointment to have lunch with somebody so that you can discuss the different things going back and forth. I love our friendship. Usually we challenge each other to pieces. We're really good about that.
It's good. I'm very grateful for that, because when I challenge others to look for an iron on iron, many times I have to describe what an iron on iron friendship looks like.
Mm.
And I'll explain. It's a healthy relationship where even if there's a miscommunication, it's talked through. It's a healthy way of how can I say that? It's a person that's going to support you and even work through healthy conflict. So we're not an avoider of conflict, or we're not an avoider of differences of opinions, but we still share and we find a way, we find a way to help each other out. I hope I'm saying that right. But we're encouraging each other and we're being accountable to each other, but we're also not just taking things as they are. We're always challenging because we know each other wants to grow. So when I'm talking to my other buddies, I'm like, you got to find somebody that's going to challenge you to grow, somebody that's going to be honest with you, and somebody you're not going to get, hurt by, in the sense of they tell you the truth. You don't go, running with the tail between your leg. You got to be willing to have that give and take in the relationship. And it's a sharpening. It's a sharpening of your swords together and in your walk in the Lord. You want that in your life. So many who don't have that. So many that don't.
And it may be for a season. I mean, we have not always lived in the same town. We've done friendship great distance as well. And it could be months before we talked again. And then once we talk, boy, we get deep fast.
Yeah.
We get deep fast. We disagree often, and we're okay with disagreeing with each other.
Yeah.
We trust, I think, more than anything. If I think you're wrong on something and you think you're right, I trust the Holy Spirit that's inside of you to show you you're wrong, and or the Holy Spirit inside of me to convict me that there's a different way to look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there's something more here. Take another look at it, Annette. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about that self-care, you said, comes to mind are friends, different leaders that I've known have gone and seen professional counselors. Were you kind of alluding to that as well, besides the iron on iron?
Sure, you could go see a counselor. Regular tune-ups, I put on my calendar to go talk to a counselor at least twice a year for myself. I'm dealing with some hot and heavy subjects with sexual abuse and trauma with people, and I want to make sure that I don't become hard of heart, that I stay soft and just ready to listen to what the Holy Spirit has to teach me and show me of what I need to go and do next. But I got to tell you, when you're listening to a lot of these things, you can leave it at the cross. You could say, okay, God, you got this. I can't carry this. This was a heavy conversation. I mean, you got to admit, how many times have you talked with somebody and heard their story and you thought in the back of your mind, there couldn't be a worse way of being abused, and somebody goes and tells you another worse way of being abused. Yeah. And it blows your mind because you're like, God, we're so deprived as human beings that people would come to this point. Yep. And it hurts your soul when you hear it yourself, but you want to be supportive and encouraging to the person that you're listening to, and you're thankful that they're sharing their heart. So just for caution's sake, I go ahead and have at least 2 appointments a year to go see a counselor myself to make sure that I'm in a good place mentally. I'm in a good place spiritually. And I got people like you who will poke at me, and I'll poke at you just to make sure that we're taking enough breaks. Yeah. We're refilling our buckets, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And resetting the switch.
A reset. Absolutely. That's a good word for it. A reset. Yes. Well, thank you for talking to me about this subject.
You're welcome. Hopefully it was encouraging.
It was encouraging for me.
Good. Amen.
All right. Take care.
You too. Take care.